Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques. Plus, an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements even further by pairing with our additional red teaming tools from CrowdStrike and Outflank. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra Core Security.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Katie Teitler and Tyler Robinson. Security Weekly community, our teams from Cybersecurity, from Security Weekly and SC Media were on site at RSA Conference 2023, delivering in-depth reporting, analysis, and interviews from the conference. If you were unable to join us in person or didn't manage to catch our video live stream from Broadcast Alley, access all of our RSA Conference 2023 coverage, including video interviews with leaders from the community. Visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Now for the enterprise security news. Now you can go back to that shot, Gus. All right. So Adrian was kind enough to drop in a ton of articles, so I didn't really need to drop in any because I think we have more than enough to cover. We'll start with some funding news. This first one is SourcePass. It announces $135 million in total funding, but it's only $65 million in new funding to augment what they had already raised, and then they acquire a company called Proxios. Katie, this looks to me like one of those traditional kind of grow through acquisition plays, like seventh acquisition in a short period of time. They're just assembling a portfolio, it looks like to me.
Yeah, I thought that as well when I read the press release, and it's almost like a double entendre here in the press release where they say we're doubling down on our investments in our clients, and yes, they're investing in their clients, but yes, they're also investing in other types of companies that might have potential clients. So I don't know much about SourcePass. But it looks like they're, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago with Antonio, it's one of the ways to pretty quickly build a portfolio and become that suite of products versus the point player, because different people on different sides of the aisle argue, well, it's better to build a point product and have best of breed. But in this day and age, I think a lot of people are just looking for a vendor that can cover myriad capabilities, because if you go to one superstore, it's a lot easier than going to 15 boutiques.
True, but here's the challenge, right, for companies like this, because I lived through this through the Security Weekly acquisition. It takes a while to integrate these businesses together, and if you know anything about what Fortra's done and their platform, like it's taken them years to get to the level of an integrated platform. So I get it that you acquire capabilities, you put yourself in a position, but if these things don't work well together and they don't look like a seamless platform, it's actually I think it will create some struggles more than it will actually solve problems. This is my guess.
I agree. And I think this has been the problem that I've had with like Tomo Bravo and stuff. Like we see all these great acquisitions of actually good companies that have been doing good things for a while with the, I would say, over expectant hope that they're going to integrate all this and make this one seamless, single pane of glass with all the magic of all 3 of the companies or all 50 of the companies that simplify our lives. But what ends up happening is we end up with a solo umbrella, less dev cycles, because now they've rolled it into the single dev platform of the company. And we're not seeing the innovation because they've been acquired and now they're a private company. So they don't have the same drive and incentive that they did prior to that. So I'm not sure that this is a great thing industry-wide, especially across the board, as we see a lot of these bigger companies just gobbling up all the small companies. And the smaller companies don't have the VC funding money out there to do some of the more innovative and challenging things just because there's not as much money.
Yeah, especially in this market, we're running into that, right? Like the funding isn't quite there. You've got a lot of people who want to do something big, and they were probably hoping. The good news is I read something today about how the M&A market is pretty hot, while the IPO market is completely in the dumpster right now. So at least there's that. But then we get into all of those problems. Yes, it might be easier to acquire, but like you said, there could be a culture fit, and you can do your best on the front end to try to ensure. But once the technologies are integrated, once the teams are integrated, that's not a snap your fingers and it's done kind of thing. It does take a while, so there are pros and cons to each. But with small companies, they're either left scrambling right now and sort of trying to make the best of the situation, or the first really good offer that comes around. I can see where that could be attractive to a younger company.
Yeah, it's interesting on a couple fronts. One, you've got a lot of private equity dollars, a lot of dry powder, and you're starting to see some interest in not just a single take it private or acquisition. They're actually starting to think about this, Tyler, and trying to bring some pieces together. Can they take 2 or 3 or 4 companies, bring them together, get some economies of scale, some efficiencies, and then roll them back out to compete with a broader player? Those are the ones I'd like to see more of, because when Thoma Bravo takes somebody out like Ping, SailPoint, and ForgeRock, right, the first thing they're doing is they're cutting dollars. They're getting them into a run rate that's profitability, but they're losing innovation potentially at the same time. And if they don't bring these companies together, like, are they just going to flip them back out in the public market when the IPO market comes back out? And the question will be, is there any value left when they go to do that? I know what Logarithm went through after the Thoma Bravo acquisition, and they're still not to a point where they could, kind of exit out of that environment, versus like, let's take 3 or 4 companies, put them together, and then go compete with somebody. That to me is a little more interesting kind of scenario, and I'd like to see more of that.
Now, I'd like to see a lot more of that, and I think it's going to take a very experienced set of leadership to do that correctly in the individual product or asset owners for those particular companies. And it's going to take a pretty big voice, and I would even say market strategy drive from the very highest level of some of those major corporations to get those back into the public sector and get them moving, successfully set them up so that they have that exchange and that value output. Because you're 100% right on that value. It is very difficult to dump all that money for acquisition, bring them in-house, get them connected and rolled into the whole process, and then by then try to figure out how to get value and develop and innovate while doing all that to get them out with some equity. That's a big ask.
Right. Well, that kind of leads into story number 2. BioCatch, the leading online fraud detection platform, welcomes Permira growth opportunities as a significant shareholder. But they're basically buying share from the other shareholders to become the 3rd largest minority shareholder. So this means probably no infusion of cash, because I've been in one of these deals way back when. It's basically buying out a portion of the portfolio. People think there's more money to spend. Actually, there's not. There's no new money. You just have a new investor. And so maybe money comes later, but you got to prove yourself.
It's a new twist on the investment market, right? People are trying to get creative with how they position themselves, since the investments are not quite where they were 2-3 years ago. So it's a creative option for sure.
Yep.
Not without risk.
Yep. Yeah. So here's
the risk appetite has been a little bit lower there too. So we're starting to see some of that that risk appetite correct itself along with the dollar amounts around the risk appetite. So
yeah, and here's the third option, article number 3. Hub Security takes in $16 million. You got to go to the paragraph right above about the Lind partners who invested. Under the terms of the agreement with Lind, They'll have access to $16 million in convertible debt financing in 3 tranches over a 2-year period. So this money's coming in phases, and they're going to have to hit milestones to get access to all that $16 million as a convertible debt. It's almost like a big safe note in some respects, but there's going to be conditions tied to each of those 3 tranches to get to the full $16 million. So again, back to your point, Tyler, how do I reduce the risk? Well, I'll give you access to $16 million, but it's only going to come out like this, and if you don't meet them, I don't even have to commit to the full $16 million.
Which it may lead to some other interesting avenues. Like you're going to have this massive swath of acquisitions to clean up just to recoup some of the money at the end of that if some of these fail. So you end up with some interesting dynamics companies and merger and acquisition pickups that could be a consolidation of bad debt and or companies that did not make some of these bigger deadlines and or numbers, which they all do. There's always some of them.
This is why I am not interested in creating my own startup right now. It's just not a very good time to do this because it's creative financing. Katie, to your point, like everybody's looking at ways to get dollars, and all the ways are being very creative. I mean, when I covered this on Security Money a few weeks ago, like large debt rounds, like large convertible debt rounds in the 400 million, like Netscopes was like 401 million. It's all convertible debt. No, it's not. I mean, those are, you didn't see those before, right? Now you're seeing all these really weird ways to structure financing deals. And then Cyber Reasons, down round was just a huge blow to the industry.
Is convertible debt the new SPAC?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Because we know the SPACs didn't work out.
Exactly. Help us all if they are.
No fake. Like Siren, gone. IronNet hanging on by a thread. Like the SPAC vehicle was not very successful to get into the market. All right, some acquisition news. Databricks acquires Okera on the data governance side. Now, this was a little interesting to me because with large learning models and AI, prior to this stuff becoming more mainstream, right? And we're talking about all this generative AI stuff. There was this kind of concern around data governance and data provenance, right? Like this is going to become I think a big thing because if you're manipulating with the base data that's used to feed these models, then the models on the other end aren't going to be accurate. And so, it's an interesting space. I just don't know how many people are actually focused on it right now.
Yeah, there's bigger problems with the forefront and seeing all of the integration. I would say the ransomware threats being, massive from being able to acquire cyber insurance. Those are kind of playing more into the thoughts of let's say financial advisors, the executives, and the governance side. I don't think it's taken a backseat because it never does, but it also hasn't gotten the same priority or I would even say weight, because governance for a while was being leveraged by some of the cyber insurance providers and being leveraged for the compliance and or security checkbox. Whether they did more or not was up to them. But the governance side kind of took a back seat where now it's like ransomware protection and making sure you get your pen tests. Are you getting certified via different new mechanisms in order to ensure that you're able to do procurement and get that cyber insurance. So those long plays and change in the way cyber insurance is requiring things, I think, put governance to a secondary position, which causes, some other issues long-term because they're required.
We'll talk about cyber insurance here a little later with some payouts.
Oh boy.
KT, any thoughts on this one?
No, nothing additional. It's Databricks, they're a mega unicorn, so they've got options.
They have options as long as they keep their cash burn under control. It's all about cash burn, folks.
Can you do that at that scale, that large? Like Cash burn is a big thing at that size.
It
Right,
is,
they've got a
and that's
lot.
what I
They
mean.
could.
Yeah. I mean, that is the biggest thing for a lot of these startups is can they control their cost structures, minimize the burn in order to keep a valuation when they go to the next round? Because look, everything I see, we don't get out of this thing at the earliest. We hit the bottom in Q3 of this year. Most people are thinking Q1 of next year, which means you got to get through the first 6 to 9 months of next year before the markets even start to open up for another raise. So who's got enough cash on hand for the next 12, 15 months? It's all about cash burn at this point. It's a huge metric.
I mean, even a company like Databricks, at one point, they were listed at a valuation of 38 billion, and then more recently, they're down to 31 billion. I mean, when you're talking numbers that big, my head starts to explode anyway. But that's a lot of money. That's going from 38 to 31. That's billion. That's not like the cash I have in my wallet. So if that's accurate, that's a lot of burn.
Yeah, a lot of burn. CrowdStrike Fortinet shares rise in broad security tech rally. Okay, so let's get to this one. I actually did a financial call. So Paul and I we do these periodically. We get on with financial advisors because they all want to get a kind of a feel for what's going on in the market. Right before that call, Zscaler pre-announces their hit, like their overpromise on their numbers, and the market takes off, right? We saw the opposite of this during RSA conference. When Tenable came out, they did their earnings announcement on Monday of RSA conference, hit their numbers, but then said future guidance, we're going to lower future guidance, and all the stocks tanked like 10% the next day. Like, the market is very fickle right now. When earnings comes out, you're seeing people get hits for other people either hitting or missing in the industry. It's a little crazy right now. So I can't explain why CrowdStrike and Fortinet see a bump when Zscaler announces, because they're in different markets. Like, they don't even do the same thing. At least with Tenable, you could say, okay, Qualys and Rapid7 might see something similar. Therefore, I'm going to go a little light on the vol management market. But these three players are in completely different markets right now. I don't know how they impact each other like this.
I don't like it. I really don't like the fact that so much is put on other people's announcements and or the fickleness of the market to determine and or like allow other people to meddle with inside of our companies and the earnings and what stocks do. Like, you think about disinformation campaigns, all of the overseas stuff we're dealing with, all of those bits and pieces, and the fickleness of our market is just setting us up to get to a place where this could cause a catastrophe. And then we end up with like runs on banks, runs on companies, people jumping stocks. Like, this is never a good thing. And I don't like the fact that we have such a fickle market, especially in the tech side of this, because a lot of the stability that the economy is relying on right now is the stability of the tech companies and our tech stacks.
It's reminiscent a little bit of 2001. Things stabilized between, for this 20-ish year period. And tech was always seen either as high growth or slow and steady growth, depending on what tech sector you were in. But now we're going back to it. Is it related to what happened with SBB and some of the other banks that followed? I don't know. That's not my area of expertise, but it is definitely unsettling. It's not unprecedented, though. It's just,
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what these financial analysts wanted to know. Like, why is this stuff going on? And it's like, look, Zscaler is in the pandemic put Zscaler in a fantastic position. It just did. Let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, they were set up to support work remote, work from home environments. Like, out of the gate, they saw a huge uptick, right? Great. CrowdStrike saw some good uptick with work from home because they saw the need to install the endpoint on other devices. They got some benefit, but for two very different reasons, right? And then you got Fortinet over here in the corner, right? And so Fortinet's going to fall into the whole bucket of Checkpoint and Palo Alto on the firewall side of the business, which I don't think the firewall business has benefited from the pandemic. I think actually it's a detriment to those vendors because as you see more people working from home, you're seeing the collapse of the corporate at work. Like how many do I need all these firewalls anymore? Like I see that as a negative, but yet all three of these guys somehow gain a benefit because of Zscaler's announcement. Anyways, it's just, this is the stuff that I don't like because I track every single one of these vendors. Like they've been in my Security Weekly 25 index for over 4 years. I've been tracking this data since 2017. I can go back and tell you when Zscaler struggled and when that kind of turned for them. I can look at every single one of these vendors. There are no parameters that correlate these vendors together, but the market sees them all the same, and I think that is a mistake, a big mistake. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, I see a consolidation, but I also like the fact that we have some additional options at scale here, especially with the firewalls, because we've ran into this place where you've got 3 major players. We're going to end up like cell phones and service providers soon if we're not careful. You know, Palo Alto, Cisco, Juniper, Fortinet, like keeping a little bit of a gap there and maintaining still some semblance of quality and or scalability and innovation, for that matter, that fits multiple price points, allows the small to medium businesses to keep playing and doing and remaining secure without getting cost out on good technology. And then we end up with some really bad things where we get Huawei. We end up with Chinese stuff in here that we just don't control.
Huawei. You're right. We don't want any of that, especially after all the supply chain stuff.
Very different. I'd much rather be in Hawaii.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Google rolls out passkey support. Anybody going to use passkeys?
Maybe. I mean, I love this idea. I love the adoption. I love the push for anything other than passwords right now, and anything other than passwords with just 2-factor, because we're in a pretty bad spot that's not moving forward. Like we've not been moving forward. We keep seeing breaches with all the ransomware leaking all this data, and the breaches, the security of your password and the number of passwords that are leaked and the ability for attackers to just go buy sessions, buy credentials. We really do have to get to this point faster if we want to make a dent on anything. So I'm all for it. I think this is great if this makes it easier. Like we've got OAuth, we've got FIDO2, we've got apps on our phone, we've got, you know, integrated single double sign-ons with tokens. Like we've got a lot of options. I think it is just getting the general public adopted quicker and more used to doing this. So whatever mechanism that is, and if it takes multiple people and providers to do this and hop on a wagon that's innovative, let's do it. Like I'm all for it.
But it's Google.
They own everything between them, Microsoft, and Microsoft. Yeah. Apple maybe has a little bit of that.
So I was talking to a non-security friend. She actually works at it's a travel company. A college friend of mine opened a Sicily travel tourism group. And so our other friend works there helping manage the tours and the guests and the whole thing. And she's been asking me all along for my unprofessional advice, my professional, unprofessional advice for her company on security. So I got her to adopt a password manager about a year ago, which I was super excited about. Anybody I can convert, yay. So we were talking about this today, and they're having some problems with their CRM. I won't get into it, but they're ridiculous. The company, their privacy policies make me want to scream. They are basically they say you can't store anything private in here because we won't guarantee that you can have any privacy for your data, and if it's breached, it's on you, so we're just going to disallow any PII. It's a CRM. So PII is inherent, right? You need some sort of data on your customers, and some of it's PII. So fast forward, we're talking about this whole issue, and she's telling me about how she's trying to get the company to go to a password vault, a shared password vault where they get, whichever one they choose, and they all have accounts. And she can't convince anybody else in the company because they're like, I can just store my passwords in Google. And she says, well, that's true. But then Google as a browser has access to all this information, and they're mining your data, and they're making money off of you, and everybody else, because they're travel. They're great people who run a great, very successful business. If you want to go to Sicily, go with them. But they could care less about security in that way. And they're like, we're just going to store all of our passwords in Google. It's so easy. And they don't understand the distinction. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And when you have a company like Google saying, hey, just trust us, but they have those two sides of the business. I use Google, I use Chrome, I have an Android phone. I'm not crapping on Google totally, but I know the risks. I think there are so many people out there who are going to see something like this and go, this is great. And they're not going to think about the implications of being owned by Google and all of the data and what that means because it's Google.
I mean, to be fair, if you use a Chrome browser, like whatever you do on that Chrome browser is, part of the data analytics. The passwords and the password list stuff, the way in which they've done the encryption, like they can't see your password. They couldn't get into your password if they wanted to. Now, a ransomware actor, if they put a browser stealer where they can steal the passwords because they're in your session, they have your token for the browser. Yeah, now your browser has leaked all those passwords. Google itself, though, through the mechanisms that they have, unless it's malicious and or via subpoena, the keys and availability of the keys are locally stored. So there's not a way to reverse those. So I argue both ways, and I 100%. I'm the paranoid guy here. I see your point, and I go back and forth, and then I come back to the fact that whatever we're doing to get people to adopt something other than what they're doing as a habit and moving them progressively forward, kicking and screaming, we do have to make those little, like your password vault example. We have to make those little efforts wherever we can so that we can continue to drive this forward, because even the password vaults have vulnerabilities, and we're seeing password vault stealing malware and vulnerabilities. So we've got to continue evolving this quicker. So whatever it takes to do that, I'm on board, and I will support anybody kind of trying to get people from using cat 1 2 3 4
or dog 1 2 3 4. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a conceptual thing, right? And I agree with you that anything we can do to notch it up just a tiny bit, but conceptually, there's just a little bit of that ick.
But there always is, and I think it's good for the general public to have that wake up call of like, privacy is dead. Like whatever you have on your phone, all the ad tracking data, everything that you're doing, you have no way to be private. So your ability and what you're posting and sharing freely is gobs more than what they're getting from data analytics and tracking. But realizing the situation we've already got ourselves in, and understanding what that means from a legislative stance moving forward for you and your kids, you have to take a little bit broader swipe and understanding, like whether you use their password manager or not doesn't change their data and analytics and or their access. So how do we begin to change hearts and win over the mindset of people to start to care about security? Because I really do think we've pretty much lost the privacy battle. I think that's been gone for the last 5 years. For sure.
But you had to dip your toe in that really contentious topic, right? You had to do it. Like, we have to get
this is the investment news. What have you done, Matt?
My brain exploding right now.
That's why we have 4 enterprise security browsers trying to replace Chrome. But does that really solve it? Maybe. But you're right. Actually, we lost privacy more than 5 years ago. We lost it with the Patriot Act, right?
I was being generous.
Yeah. But I mean, that's when we lost it. We lost the privacy battle with the Patriot Act. Let's just call a spade because that's when it happened. We were down a path of privacy. 9/11 hits, Patriot Act comes out, it's gone. That's why it's being done at the state level and not at the federal level right now. The states are trying to do it, but there's only so much they're going to be able to do. It should be done at the federal level, but it's going to fly in the face of the Patriot Act. But
I mean, to be fair, like even outside of the Patriot Act and like what we do, the government does with that data, we lost that when they monetized the ability to do advertisement with inside of web browsers and put that on web pages. So we can go back to, we're going to call AOL out on this and just say it's your fault.
Who owns AOL now? Verizon? It's their fault now?
Well, Tyler lives up north, so he doesn't care about the Patriot Act.
Right.
I'm good.
Good. Good. Merck might get actually their payout from their cyber insurer. So court has said, no, this is covered as part of insurance. It's not an act of war per se, which is what the cyber insurers tried to claim for NotPetya, because it didn't include any military action. It's an interesting ruling. We'll see if it stays and is upheld. But that's potentially good news for people who have cyber insurance policies. I'm not sure it's good for the cyber insurers as a whole, however.
I'm not sure I care how the cyber insurers feel, or any insurance company for that matter. But I do think this is a good precedent to set, because there were a lot of people in the industry who are getting exceptionally frustrated at the fact that they had to have cyber insurance, but there were so many caveats, there were so many asterisks, there were so many, okay, well, if you don't do exactly what we say, and so I think this is good.
Yeah, this is good precedence, in my opinion. There's nothing good that comes of trying to blame a sophisticated attack, or everything that they call APT. It could be considered a nation state. So now they have a weaselly way to get out of any cyber insurance policy because it's sophisticated in some manner that is not sophisticated at all most of the time. So I think this is great. We've made leaps and bounds with cyber insurance. They're doing good things. Well, some of them, the good ones, are doing good things around pushing people to get proper assessments. Questionnaires are becoming, non-existent. We're actually validating and verifying good security. So people are doing good security. So it's one of the few ways that we have leverage to push security and the security boundary further and further out so it gets better. And I think that's a great thing. Now, it's still insurance. Let's all call a spade, and insurance will always try to find a way out of paying policy, because this is the first 2 or 3 years that they've ever lost money on cyber insurance. And so it is hitting them kind of where it hurts, and they're having to adjust and make changes, which is great. I think this pushes, but I don't want to see them get out by legislation via precedents.
Agreed. Another good precedent, ex-Uber security chief Joe Sullivan gets probation, not jail time. Also a very good precedent, because first of all, I don't think he should have been charged in the first place, but that's a whole different discussion. But at least from a sentencing perspective, I think it's 3 years probation and 200 community hours or something like that.
That feels right, honestly. That feels a little more just. And let's be real, like, we start sending all these executives to jail that have a lot of money. Like, this doesn't end well for anybody. Like, they're not cut out for that life in any way, shape, or form. And this just ends up as a bad precedent that people just won't take that risk. And we lose a lot of good leadership and institutional knowledge that we desperately need for many organizations right now. So I think it's good.
We were talking last week about the banking crisis, 2007, 2008, and the actual lack of bankers who went to jail, and they tanked the global economy. The global economy. And one guy went to jail. I'm not saying what Joe did is right or wrong or whatever, but seriously, that's what we're focused on, sending a cyber executive to jail. There's something wrong with the system. And so, yeah, thankfully, this is going in a better direction than it looked like it was going for a while.
Yeah, the organization and enterprise and executives that ran that organization need to all be held liable as a group, as one whole, where we are making an example of them and not people. This is institutional, and I think that needs to be brought up and done correctly with the executives that we're all involved. If we brought them all together as an executive group and had, each of them do 200 hours of community service and some maybe more creative punishments with some monetary value hits, I think, taking their stocks, donating those to causes, all of those great things that we could come up with, those would be where I would like to see this get to.
Joe is a scapegoat. Let's be honest.
Yes. Yeah.
If you've ever been on an executive team, you don't act in isolation. You almost can't by default.
Right. Yeah. And it will be interesting, KT, to your point about what's going to happen in the fallout of SBB and First Republic, right? I mean, we're repeating the 2007, 2008 debacle in some respects now. And how many of those executives are going to face this kind of scrutiny?
No, government's just going to bail them out. They're just going to bail them out, and then private companies are going to buy them up. Nobody's going to serve jail time. And they're going to say, well, this is different, and I get it. I understand the differences. But, yeah, nobody's going to jail for that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Next topic. Could bartenders fill the growing tech needs? I'm thinking the other way around. I'm thinking I need to just focus more time on my bartending skills from the cybersecurity side. So I don't know. Anybody thought this one?
I think there's a lot of places that we can recruit and find good people that have people skills, social skills, the ability to do creative problem solving, tenacious people, all of these, characteristics of hacker security people, information security people. Great. That still does not get them up to speed where we can rely on them in the next 2 years to do a fully capable technical role with the experience and understanding that is required to fill the gap across multiple disciplines. That, like, okay, great. I get what the article's getting at, but at the same time, we can go pick and pluck people from all over. And I think there's a lot of great people in all the verticals. So I don't think it helps our tech gap in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's very optimistic that you could take somebody with the personality that would thrive as a bartender and thrust them into the security field. And it's hard enough for extroverts who work in this field, and they weren't like those kind of people who just thrive on people. We all see what happens at Black Hat and DEF CON and B-Sides, right? I don't think that's a great recipe, pun intended, for success, throwing an uber gregarious type person into this industry. Yes, I get it. We need communication skills. We're not good at that as an industry. We need to be better able to socially engineer each other in positive ways. Bartenders are great at that. But I think taking someone who's almost the opposite of what the security industry is and being like, hey, come to our industry. Those are for cybersecurity marketing teams, not for the tech roles.
Right. I think they're insinuating that we like to drink a lot too in the industry. Guilty as charged. So yeah.
The other Tyler frequently drinks on camera, so it's fine.
I was actually given permission from my CEO, I think it was last week, that if I needed to have a drink after 4 o'clock on a meeting, she was okay with it. Like, good, because with the podcast, it might happen earlier.
I mean, we have to drink because there's such a technology gap, and we know that no one's coming to rescue us. And really, we see we've gotten to that feudalism stage. We're past cynicism, and we're to futility. So, so alcohol masks that.
Cynicism? What's the level?
Cynicism is like you're only on like step 8 there. We just got a 12-step program. We've got futility, and then we've got desperation, and I don't know what's after that yet. I haven't gotten there.
But I do think you compare cynicism with desperation. It's a good cloak.
Thus the alcohol.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's where the alcohol comes in. All right, let's get to a couple more serious articles here. Let's see. Oak Ridge National Lab uses colors in the Fibonacci sequence to mask OT and grid data. It's an interesting article. It's a little complex though, but I get the basics of it, right? Is they're using other signals as a way to communicate data off of non-IT networks that keeps it hidden from attackers. It's a really interesting concept. I just don't know what its limitations are.
Yeah, I was trying to read and understand because they got into a little bit of the background and math, and then I'm like, okay, so how does that actually improve and apply? Which, I mean, is fascinating, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot to Fibonacci and the math that you can do from it, but what does it actually improve that we're not doing with like heuristics and AI and all, you know, the machine learning stuff? Like, how are they making this better with that? I haven't finished the very end of that because I got stuck on the math and what they're trying to tell me there, but it was very interesting to see them using these types of things.
Yeah. KT's like, yeah, move on. All right, DEF CON to set thousands of hackers.
I just have nothing to say about math, Matt.
I got it.
She doesn't like math right now.
Yeah, we're talking math. I like this story better. DEF CON to set thousands of hackers loose on large learning models. Heck yeah. Like,
it's going to be very interesting.
This could be very interesting, right? The question is, how susceptible are some of these large learning models to attacks? What kind of attacks? We talked about data governance and provenance earlier. Like, how susceptible are they to that? Like, can that influence outputs? Like, look, there's a lot of buzz around AI and these generative AI models using large language apps. Like, but how valid will they be? Can they hold up to some of the scrutiny? It'll be interesting. So I can't wait to see the results of some.
It's gonna be a disaster, and the media is gonna have a field day and a frenzy on it. I'm gonna tell you, like we've been doing AI hacking, like however you view that, for a little while, and there's been a lot of companies spun up to try and talk through the security implications around, you know, AI models. Like, can you taint the learning models? Can you cause the learning models to output and do certain changes that affect other things? Can you do bias based on different input validation strings? So all those things, and that doesn't even take into account the infrastructure and the API calls and ability to circumvent protections, guardrails. There's a substantial amount of testing and vetting yet to be done that I don't think people have quite gotten to the point where they realize how new this technology is, how unvetted and untested it is, because it takes a substantial amount of understanding and even higher math to know where the points are of testing just to get to kind of the entry level pieces of this. So there's not as many people looking at it, and therefore it's not been brought to the attention. But this is a fairly immature model from a security standpoint that will fall down at DEF CON.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Because when my other two co-hosts are here, they are fanboys. And I get it. But I think we have to proceed with a little bit more caution, especially because we have this issue of being locked into, it's not a monopoly, but a very, very small group of companies that are supplying the technology upon which larger businesses are basing their future revenue streams.
Well, there's limited numbers of models being leveraged for that as well, which companies are sharing between each other. So, like, in order to compute some of those models, they take years, and that's all being shared. So we end up with a taint in one of those. We end up with interesting bias, or we end up like with what we're seeing. Even the mainstream is catching on to the fact that, hey, AI actually outputs falsities and lies to you and doesn't do it based on what you prompt and how good the back-end model that's being leveraged is used. So we're already starting to see some of the fallout of what AI is and the limitations. Now, not to say that that's not going to be overcome. There's multiple models being redeveloped, different things being open sourced and provided, which adds additional data points and creativity and innovation. But from a security standpoint, again, these are all just innovations. In fact, almost none of this is being evaluated from the security side. And people are integrating this into every app out there, like all the SaaS platforms. Even our search engines are now integrating this. So the security side of this, I think, is going to be the Wild West for a little while. It's going to be similar to web apps and SaaS as they first came out and were placed on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about security, so maliciousness, that potential is huge. Obviously, I won't go back to the idea of nation states. What's the best way to, just poison your AI, right? And that's so easy to do. But you don't have to even have to have malicious intent in a lot of cases. And that's the scary thing, because we know that misinformation and disinformation travels faster and broader than actual facts. So even if you take the maliciousness out of it, you've got this poison data set. And the more data it gets, the more likely it is to ingest that. So you have to be super, super, super careful with the models. And then if you have somebody malicious on top of that, all they have to do is have 1 million bots. They have to be funded by their government and sitting in buildings and owned by their government and told by their government and paid by their government and assured that they're not going to be killed by their government if they do what the government says. Who am I talking about? I don't know. There are no countries out there like that. And we really have to be a lot more careful. So it'll be interesting. I can't go to DEF CON this year, but according to the article, this was my favorite line, the first one, if you haven't read the article yet and you're listening. This year's DEF CON AI Village has invited hackers to show up, dive in, and find bugs. What else do we do at DEF CON?
Right. But it ties into the last article we're going to cover in this segment, which is we know the risks because we think about this stuff. But the investment side, they're going to pour billions of dollars into startups around this before they even know whether there's an issue or not. And I'm going to tie this back together, right? We saw the pendulum shift on the cybersecurity side when the economy went south, right? And things got tight, money dried up, hard to get funding. But people are willing to throw billions of dollars into these startups before they even know whether this is a viable technology. When do we hit that pendulum swing?
So I'm actually writing an article on this. I've been doing a little research on numbers and money, and because the quickest way to get funding right now is just to say use AI. You don't even have to be creating the damn AI. You just have to be using it. And my CMO sent me something yesterday. It's a VC firm using ChatGPT on the homepage of their website. So they're clearly bought in, and I asked it a bunch of questions, and I'm not that smart. I didn't really ask it complicated questions, and for 2 out of 3 questions, it couldn't give me an answer. I asked it about the size of the market.
I can't even get AI to write my emails for me right now. Like, let's be real. As much as I love it, and there's some interesting things you can get it to spit out, and there's some cool analysis pieces. It does look at scripts and stuff and tells you some summarizations and some quick learning. Like, there's all kinds of creative uses for it. It doesn't do any better than my brain does in 15 seconds either. So like, I'm just not sold on the time save yet, and I hope it gets there, but as I keep trying.
Maybe it can catch my typos better than my brain can, but
yeah, I mean it's like I don't know. I tried to get it to do MLA format and help me review a essay for my daughter for school last night, and let me tell you, I'm a much faster proofreader than it is, and it's not very good. So it's like having an intern, and by the time you explain all the stuff you need the intern to do and the detail it needs, I could have just done it, and now I've wasted my time because I have to check it and redo it anyway.
But if you train it, you can have it do the next one, Tyler.
Yeah, I got to train it. I just got to invest the time and be a good mentor. That's the problem.
All right, on the investment time thing, I'm gonna cut us. Thank you, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today. This was fun. I've missed you guys on the show because so much great topics. Thank you everyone for watching and listening this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Stay tuned. We got 3 pre-recorded interviews from RSA Conference 2023 coming up next.